Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're giving folks about a minute or two to get started. Para los que gustarían escuchar nuestra presentación en español, pueden ir abajo de su pantalla. Hay un botón que dice Interpretation. Puede escoger el lenguaje que gusta escuchar esta programación. Gracias. Okay, good evening, everyone. It's about 6:04, 6:05. Again, my name is Angel Barnuevo. I am the Community and Public Information Officer for the Montebello Unified School District. Thank you for being with us here this evening. At this moment, I'd like to introduce our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Anthony J. Martinez. Dr. Martinez?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Barnuevo. I'd like to welcome our attendees to this evening's community forum. The focus of tonight's presentation will be on long-term fiscal stability planning. This presentation was given before our Board of Education, but we'd like to now offer it to our community members as we continue discussing what are some of the challenges that the district is facing and some of the possible changes that the school district is going to need to take in the near future. So this evening, we will have Dr. Garland sharing a bit about our demographics, our enrollment, and how that's impacting not only Montebello Unified School District, but also within the context of that's something that's being seen throughout the state of California. And then we'll then transition over to Mr. Allingson, who's going to talk about the impacts of the 2 charter schools that are coming into the Montebello Unified School District, as well as the reductions, fiscal reductions that need to be made within the Montebello Unified School District in the upcoming years. So again, I'd like to thank all of you for taking time out of your evening to join us during this community forum. Dr. Garland?
And I'm sorry, really quick, Dr. Garland, before you start. Para los que no están con nosotros ahora, si gusta escuchar esta presentación en español, sí está disponible en español. Si va abajo de su pantalla, hay un botón que dice interpretación o interpretation y puedes escoger el lenguaje que gustaría escuchar esta presentación. Gracias. Dr. Garland, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Martinez. Good evening, Montebello community members. Tonight, our community forum will focus on long-term fiscal stability planning. I'm Allison Garland, the Assistant Superintendent of Student Services, and I will be presenting with my fellow cabinet member, Mr. Don Ellingson, the Interim Assistant Superintendent of Business Services. The beginning of this presentation will highlight the executive summary of a student population forecast study conducted by Davis Demographics and presented to the Board of Education on January 20th, 2021. This study will help set the stage for the fiscal stability portion of this presentation. To review for the community, the data used for the demographics study to project our student population was the following: an updated GIS, or Geographic Information System data, researched area population characteristics, acquired latest parcel and street data from the county CIS or GIS department, meetings and conference calls with city planning and district, and incorporated new residential development and projections, calculated specific factors for Montebello USD area, which is your birth rate and mobility, and generated student forecasts based on current attendance areas. In the next few slides, I will highlight for the community the executive summary of the demographic study that was presented in January. The study found a continued decline in K-12 resident student population within the district boundary over the next 10 years. The state of California has experienced an overall decline in births over the last 10 years, and they've been the lowest numbers of births since 1933. In addition, MUSD experienced a historic low number of incoming kindergartners this past fall, which was October 2019, when compared to kindergartners over the past 4 years. Here's a sample of data that was included in the study. This table includes the kindergarten birth and capture rates for the zip code 90040. Kindergarten birth rates consist of forecasted resident kindergarten population, and capture rate indicates the percentage of the school age resident population within the MUSD boundaries who are choosing to enroll at an MUSD school. The study also found a large class size bubble that currently exists within the high school grades. These large class size bubbles are due to graduate soon and be replaced by smaller class sizes within the elementary and intermediate school grades. And this next slide is a graphic of that bubble. So it's in 9th, 10th, 11th, and the seniors. The demographic study also looked at mobility factors and found that overall, there is an out-migration pattern as the K-12 resident students progress through the grades. These lower mobility factors could represent students whose family are moving outside of the district boundary, or it could be students that are electing to attend non-MUSD schools. The MUSD capture rate has dropped overall by approximately 3% to 74% when compared to fall 2017, when the capture rate was 77%. And here is a table of the mobility factors. This is our enrollment as of March 12th. These are our high schools and intermediate. And the next slide is our elementary schools. So the executive summary of the demographic study concluded with the total enrollment of the MUSD TK through 12 students as of fall 2019 stood at 24,296 students. By fall of 2029, TK through 12 enrollment is projected to decrease by over 7,000 students to 17,267 students enrolled in MUSD. And then here's a table from this study. That's a graphic of that amount of students of enrollment. So now that the executive summary of the demographic study was reviewed for our community, I'm going to introduce Mr. Ellingson, who's going to review the fiscal impact of declining enrollment as well as other long-term expenditures for our school district. Mr. Ellingson.
Thank you, Allison.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. Sorry, Mr. Ellingson, just a few housekeeping terms. We will be answering questions at the end of the presentation. If anybody has a question, feel free to write them in the Q&A below on the screen. Para nuestros oyentes que gustarían escuchar nuestra presentación en español, abajo de su pantalla hay un botón que dice interpretación. Puede empujar ahí y escoger el lenguaje que gustaría escuchar esta presentación. Si tienen algunas preguntas, también las pueden poner en el chat abajo, a donde dice Q&A, y haremos lo mejor para darle las respuestas. Gracias. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ellingson.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. Here are the FICMAT Fiscal Health Risk Analysis items. The district has met with LACO to discuss some of these items and is planning on responding or correcting items that may exist currently. You'll note here, some of the items include key positions vacant, which our governing board has approved the hiring of at our last board meeting for an assistant superintendent of human resources. Personnel salaries are not encumbered in the county financial system. We have a meeting scheduled with LACO for next week to discuss this and understand how this can be accomplished, if it can be accomplished. Minimum reserves not met. The minimum reserves at budget adoption included $2.4 million of fund balance that was set aside to meet the requirement. And this was adjusted at the district's 45-day budget revision, which the board approved on August the 5th of 2020. Continuing with the FICMAT Fiscal Health Risk Analysis items. This is an excerpt taken from the report that concerns the year-over-year enrollment decline that Dr. Garland was speaking about. And it projects that the district will have an accelerated enrollment loss, which will be coupled with the charter schools that have been approved to operate within the district boundaries. And this will cause the district to receive loss of revenue, which may entail the district reducing its expenditures, including its compensated expenditures. Continuing with the FICMAT Fiscal Health Analysis items, another item pulled off. Has the district refrained from including carryover funds in its adopted budget? No. Part of this reason is it's a LACO requirement that the district budgets carryover dollars for its supplemental and concentration student population in the budget. So for that reason, the expenditures appear to be rather high year over year. We discussed this with LACO, and we will be discussing with FICMAT again. This is a LACO requirement. Continuing with the fiscal health risk analysis performed by FICMAT, item for collective bargaining agreements, that the district has exceeded its cost of living adjustment provided by the LCFF in its allocation of bargaining unit increases to salary schedules over the years presented. The top row of data you'll see is the funded COLA provided by the LCFF, which augments the revenue that we get for ADA. And the three rows below the first row are the bargaining units that exist within the Montebello Unified School District. Continuing with the fiscal health risk analysis from FICMAT, does the district use its facilities fully in accordance with the Office of Public School Construction Loading Standards? No. And here you'll see a delineation of each level of our student population. Continuing with our long-term fiscal planning, items the district is reviewing include the decrease in revenue, part of which is brought on by the loss of enrollment, and there's no one-time funding that the district is receiving aside from the COVID dollars that are coming in for improving infrastructure and safety for both personnel and our student population. Escalating compensated costs, which include our salaries, our wages, our benefits. Rising employer contributions to retirement, which includes CalSTRS and CalPERS contribution costs, all of which can potentially cause decreases in our fund balance. Here you'll see our student enrollment of schools less than 1,000 students. And you'll note all but 3 of our schools are below that mark. Here is the projected enrollment loss to charter schools that have been given the opportunity to operate within district boundaries, which will have a decrease effect in our revenue. This is a combined look from TK through 12th grade for both approved charter schools. Here is the projected loss of ADA revenue from those charter schools, projected ADA loss that our district may suffer from. You'll note that it builds upon itself in the out years. It's nearly $20 million in year 2025-26. Here's a look at our loss of enrollment from a 5-year window from 2015 to 2020. And you'll see that the district has had an average loss of enrollment greater than 4%. Coupled with the decreased revenue, the district has increasing expenditures, which include salary schedule step and column increases. Again, as we mentioned, contributions to CalSTRS and CalPERS from the district, as well as mandatory costs that the district must maintain. So the first set of data are step and column increases to salary schedules broken out by unit within the district for both certificated and classified, and what that looks like on an annual basis. The next block of data is the CalSTRS employer contribution, and below that is the CalPERS employer contribution. And then the routine restricted maintenance account is the 3% account that the district is required to set aside for restricted maintenance within the district, and its effect on those rising costs above. And as you can see, it causes the total unrestricted general fund expenditures to increase. Here is the net effect on the fund balance for the cost increases and the approved charter schools. This is a projected for this year and the out years. And you can see the projected ending fund balance goes from positive to negative as a projection in year 24-25. Thank you very much. Mr. Barnuevo, are there any questions, sir?
Thank you so much. I would like to remind folks, if you have any questions based on the presentation that we've seen tonight, please feel free to write them below in the chat. We do have a few questions that have already came in, not so much pertaining to this topic, but if someone on the panel, a lot of folks are asking about the reopening of our schools. If anybody would like to chime in.
So yes, with regards to the reopening of the schools, we are about to conclude visiting all our schools for the walkthroughs that we've been conducting to make sure that the HVACs and the hand sanitizing, that the restrooms and everything is conducive to provide a safe environment to our students and our personnel. There are ad hoc meetings that are also taking place. I know Dr. Ewan has called meetings with adult education, early learning, to see where we're at with the possibility of some of our groups returning to our campuses. Special education, I know we've started with the in-person assessment, and depending if we have an MOU with a nearby school district, some of our students in special education will commence their services. So we are moving forward in that direction. We do have a standing MOU with our associations, in that back in November, it was that we would continue for the remainder of the school year in online education. But where we see that there is a possibility, we are having ongoing conversations with our association employee groups to see if that is a possibility. But we do want to emphasize that we are collectively working on visiting all our schools and ensuring that it's not just bringing the students back, but also offering them a safe environment, not only the students, but also our personnel that will be supporting them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez. And we had a follow-up to that. These preparations continue all year long, and they started the minute that unfortunately we had to close our schools approximately about a year ago. And these, as our superintendent mentioned, these are ongoing conversations based on our current situation. At this moment, I would like to see if there's any other questions. Please feel free to write them in the chat. Again, tonight's topic specifically on our enrollment and our long-term fiscal stability plan. As you saw, there's a lot of data that we presented tonight, with some interesting numbers, some alarming numbers. This is not unique to Montebello. I know a lot of districts statewide perhaps might be going through the situation. So I'll give folks about a minute or two to type their questions.
Mr. Chen, if you don't mind, could you please read a slide that had the schools under 1,000? Yes, this one. So one of the things to point out here is that with the slide that was shown earlier, where we've been losing approximately 1,000 students per year, when we have our audit reports and when we have the outside entities reviewing our numbers, they usually use our schools as an example. And so when they tell us you're losing about 1,000 students per year, that would mean that all of these schools would be closed due to the decline of 1,000 students. We've been declining for the last 10 years, something that is not only happening in Montebello Unified, but also other school districts in Los Angeles County and California. And so for us, I believe Mr. Ellingson pointed out that we only have 3 schools that exceed the 1,000 enrollment, with the exception of our large high schools. We do have large high schools that are over 2,000 students, but for the most part, you can see our elementary schools, our intermediate schools, they're all under 1,000. So making an analysis, I know in previous board meetings, there's been conversations and input from the community as to the possible repurposing of elementary schools. And so here, when we look at this slide, it's not only the potential repurposing of elementary schools, but it's also the possibility of reconfiguring our schools in order to maximize the school capacity. So we want to make sure that we're engaging the community, that we have ample time to discuss, as Mr. Ellingson pointed out. Mr. Ellingson, if you can please, or Mr. Chen, forward to the slide that shows that we're positive, and then we'd be going to a negative according to the projections. Thank you. So here, this is a very important slide for us. It shows that in the present fiscal year, 2020-2021, we are scheduled to end this year with an ending balance of $68 million. I know some attendees and community members have joined us as we're walking the schools. We will be needing to hire additional personnel in order to offer safe facilities. And so that will further increase our expenditures. And then when we look at 22-23, 23-24, we're projecting to end that fiscal year with $2 million. In 24-25, we would be negative $16 million. So according to these projections, we have what appears to be a few years to plan and start making reductions on our expenditures. But at the same time, while we are being presented with data to make reductions in expenditures with the pandemic and what it has caused, we know that we are increasing our expenditures. And so this graph or this table can change very quickly. And then I think, Mr. Barnuevo, there are some questions. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop at this point.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez, for that. So one of the questions that came in, more pertaining to the district's plan to address learning loss.
So Dr. Ewan, did you want to elaborate a little bit on the plan? And then Dr. Garland, after Dr. Ewan, if you want to talk about, well, Dr. Ewan, if you can talk about the academic component, and then Dr. Garland, if you can talk about the mental, the mental health support that we're going to need for our students who are lacking that socialization, if you will, particularly the early learning. So Dr. Ewan?
Yes, so we will be offering summer school to our students to provide additional support. At this time, summer school will continue to be expanded. So if schools need additional sections or additional courses, the district is here to support them. Particularly our high school, for students who are credit deficient, we will offer those courses for them so they can take and make up those courses. We also are looking into providing some additional experiences for some of our lower grade students. For instance, our kindergartners, they have not set foot on a campus this year. And when they return to school as first graders, they may need to learn all of the operations and know-abouts and where to go on the school campus. So we may be offering some type of get to know the campus, what do you call it? Like the, just to get them acculturated to the school system and the processes and practices at a school. Those information will be sent out shortly. We are right now working on the process of hiring the teachers. And then once that's set, the schools will be recruiting students for summer school. So we do have that available. And then right now, many of our high schools offer credit accrual opportunities. So if you have a high school student who needs some more credits, please talk to your school administrators and teacher and have the students enroll in credit accrual so they can make up any of the classes that they need credits in. And then for our elementary and intermediate schools, many of our schools are offering after-school tutoring. Some are even offering Saturday tutoring. So again, please contact the school to find out what's being offered.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Yuen. We also have another question comment.
Can I interrupt really fast? I wanted to, sorry, Mr. Marca, but I wanted to answer the question regarding the mental health for our students. We do understand that distance learning has been really rough on our students, and we have partnered this year with a company that is going to help us deliver a curriculum in social emotional learning in order to help our students gain those skills. We also partner with mental health outside organizations, and we'll continue to do that so we can address the needs of our students. We're also looking into hiring some counselors at the elementary level as well, so that we can work at those levels with those students. Dr. Martinez, is there anything else you wanted me to add?
No, I think that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnego.
Thank you, Dr. Garland. We have another question that came in. Can an update be given at each board meeting, providing the board members with a number of students that perhaps might be leaving the district or the declining enrollment? I do know that just last board meeting, we gave the same presentation. Is that correct, Dr. Garland?
Yes, that is. And our board members receive memos frequently that have our enrollment numbers as well as our attendance rates. So they're well informed.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Garland. Continuing on with the questions that are coming in. One in particular about Bandini Elementary, if that would be a good option for the charter, since they seem to have a net loss of students, and also the lowest number of students attending. Dr. Yuen, Dr. Martinez, I know that we had 2 forums about charter schools, but perhaps a quick update on the latest.
Yeah, so at this time, at the previous board meeting, the board did authorize the final offer to both charter schools. So for KIPP, Gascon Elementary School will be offered for Prop 39. And then for Time Charter School, Montebello High will be offered for Prop 39. So now the charter schools will have until, the district has until April 1 to provide this final offer to them. And then the charter schools have until May 1 or 30 days upon receipt of the final offer to respond back to us. If they do not respond to us, then it voids the process and they cannot use any of our school facilities for a year, and they will have to wait another year to apply.
Perfect.
And Mr. Barnuevo, if I may add to that, in addition to the charter school conversation, in the near future, and I would say this is the beginning of it, we will need to continue discussing the possibility of reconfiguring our schools or repurposing our schools. Reconfiguring, at one point in time, Montebello Unified, its elementary schools went through 5th grade. And so, we need to see how do we maximize the space at our campuses, as well as the repurposing is where maybe we combine students from one elementary school and send them to a nearby elementary school and use that facility for a different purpose. Those aren't easy decisions that would be made, but we do need to continue the conversation regarding reducing our expenditures in the Montebello Unified School District. And as we've seen in other school districts, unfortunately, that does mean the repurposing of schools reconfiguring schools. Some people call it closing schools. So one is looking at how we can best meet the needs of our students, but at the same time being mindful of our fiscal situation. We had anticipated that we were going to have additional years, if you will, to continue this conversation, but with the implementation of these two new charter schools, it pretty much expedited everything for us. So we're gonna have to do it in a more timely manner. Back to you, Mr. Barnuevo.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez. Continuing with some of our questions, and I believe Dr. Yuen and Dr. Garland might have already covered, but many children are being affected throughout distance learning. How is the district going to help them, specifically children with disabilities?
So I had already answered the question about the mental health piece. As far as students identified with special needs, we are working on and working with our associations to figure out how we can get our students back for some related services. So we're working on that plan. Of course, the IEP will address, any of new issues that have come up with students before the last IEP. So the IEP, we can create new goals, and we'll have to work as a team to create those goals for their students and ensure they have the services that they need.
Dr. Garland, in addition to the services, if you could just be a little bit more specific about the anticipated expenditures, the investment that is going to be necessary to prepare for the return of our students in special education for next year.
Okay, I want to make sure that to clarify, to just discuss how we're going.
So for example, when we've been going to the schools, we've been talking about like restroom facilities, diapering stations. So if you can just talk about, those are additional expenditures that we currently have one set of protocols, but now with the pandemic and with the change of protocols, what we've been discussing in terms of changes in order to meet our students in that population.
Thank you. Yes, we will have to add additional facilities in order for our students, for example, that have maybe diapering needs or toileting needs, because the students have to stay so many feet apart while they're on campus. So we can't use the same amount of facilities that we were able to before. We don't have the access. So we will have to invest monies into that, and also for personnel. We looked at what we need for the nurse's office, what we need for isolation rooms, for quarantine rooms. So that's part of the process as we walk through schools, is we're looking at where would we have the students that are displaying symptoms, and where do we put the personnel to make sure that we can provide those services to those students safely while they're on campus. So as we conduct our walks, we're making lists and making plans in order for all the students to return safely.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Garland. Thank you, Dr. Martinez. We have another comment that came in. Filling vacancies pre-COVID under classified have not been filled with COVID. It's going to increase, and the ratio of classified and certificated is not equal. So again, speaking to the personnel at our schools as well. If enrollment is decreasing and there is continuing financial loss, what does that mean for class sizes?
And so with that particular question is that there is a strong possibility that class size can increase. Right now, we've been a participant of the TK through third grade GSA program, where we receive money so that we can have our classes 24-1. When possible, we've also attempted to have 24-1 in our fourth grade class. And the goal was to also have that in fifth grade. But as the numbers continue to decrease and the funding continues to decrease as well, then that is a possibility that our class sizes would increase. At this point, we're still working with the 24-1. We're still offering, at least at the intermediates and high schools, electives, where some of them have small or low enrollment, because we feel that the monies that our students are generating are to support them at the level that they're currently at. So while we do have students who need intervention or who need safety nets, we also have other students who are accelerated and need to be challenged. And so, we are attempting to educate all our students and provide them that schooling experience that they deserve. Mr. Barnuevo?
Thank you, Dr. Martinez. Um, Continuing on to some of our questions. Again, this relates as to, I think, something that you may have covered, Dr. Garland. Perhaps mentioning, what does returning to school look like? And will the parents and community be informed? Yes, absolutely. We will inform, obviously, our parents and our students when we do plan to bring everyone back. Um, we're still hashing out all of the specifics, but Dr. Garland, I know you've been, and Dr. Martinez and everyone has been on some of these walks. Would you care to share just perhaps a tidbit about what is being discussed?
Yeah, so a little bit, excuse me, and then Mr. Ellingson and Cabinet, feel free to add. We've been walking schools. Our association representatives have joined us. Board members have also been part of the walk, parents and school personnel. Right now, when it comes to our preparation, when we're opening, we have identified that we need to hire additional people. Some of the job titles that we will be hiring are additional custodians. Also, the possibility of hiring licensed vocational nurses at our schools, looking at additional site computer technicians. And so right now we are experiencing, again, we're in that catch-22 where the audits and our numbers show that we should be decreasing our expenditures, that we should be decreasing personnel. But on the contrary, with the pandemic, we are finding ourselves in the need to hire additional people in order to have everyone safe. In addition to that, when it comes to what we will be offering in the fall, we will, surveys will be sent out. I believe the high school one has gone out, and the surveys will go out for the intermediate and the elementary to see which instructional model our parents are interested for their students. So we'd like to know how many students are going to want to continue in online education for the next school year, how many students are going to want to return. When students return, there are various options that we are considering. And one is that some of our students get transportation or they're bused to, whether it be their elementary, intermediate, or high school. So we need to make sure that we have the manpower and the employees to transport our students depending on the school, as well as them being mindful of the expenditures. But having said that, there's nothing definitive, but one is some stakeholders have indicated that they would like their students to go to school the majority of the weekdays. So let's say they go 4 days, possibly 5, but let's say 4 days. If we have a large number of students who want to be on campus or receive on-site education, then that would trigger that we would need to have a morning group and an afternoon group. And that is because that is the requirement in the Los Angeles Department of Public Health order, that the classes cannot have more than 14 students at the elementary level. At the intermediate and high school, it is dependent upon what is called a stable group. How many desks fit in a classroom? Now, we have been operating under the 6 feet physical distancing. Yesterday, some of the attendees may have seen that the CDC has since changed their recommendation from 6 feet to 3 feet. Nevertheless, as we continue our visits, we're still operating under the 6 feet physical distancing, yet that may be subject to change. So when it comes to what program we'll be offering, it's not just bringing our students back. We also need to have the manpower, because right now the guidance indicates disinfecting every hour. And so right now our schools, for example, our elementary schools have one plant supervisor. So if we have a lot of classrooms, that one person can't possibly disinfect all the classrooms and all the rooms that are used at that school. So we are looking at hiring additional personnel. The other option that has been presented to us is, well, instead of having students go for a morning session or an afternoon session, why don't they just go for the full day? So if they go for the full day, depending on how many students want on-site education, it may be that students come 2 days out of the week for on-site and the other days are at home so that another group can come in for another 2 days. And so the question may be, well, why just 2 days? Well, the health order also restricts that each teacher can only work with up to 2 groups of students. So the guidance, the requirements in the health orders are constantly changing. So by the time we get to June, July, August, it may change, excuse me, but right now, that's the health order that we're following. And then last, I just wanted to mention that the health order also indicated that if we have a teacher teaching his or her students in class and one student or the teacher or someone tests positive in that class, then that entire group would go home for, let's say, 3 weeks. And then they come back and then another student tests positive, then that whole group goes back home for another 3 weeks. Dr. Garland, would you mind sharing a little bit about the update that was just released where it is possible that maybe we won't have this yo-yo effect of back and forth?
Yes, thank you. So as you all know, as we learn more things, things do change. So I just have found out that universally, we don't necessarily have to send the whole group home if someone tests positive. So that part we're working on. There's several questions that you follow up with the student if they do test positive. And depending on if they say yes or no to those questions, for example, are they showing symptoms? Did they test positive for COVID in the past? Have they been exposed to anyone who is showing symptoms or has tested positive? So there's very specific questions we will ask the students, and it doesn't mean they necessarily have to send the whole group home. So that's new news to us, and we will have decision pathways and all that set up for when the students return. And Dr. Martinez, there was a question in here about the communication piece too, and we have been talking to principals about the importance of ensuring that they share their reopening plan with their community. We do have a draft of a district plan, and then the schools are going to add their specific pieces in there because every school is a little different. The exits and the entrances are in different places. The temperature machines are in different places. So each of our principals will be communicating with that plan with their community. And we did hear from parents while we were doing walks how important that is. So thank you for mentioning that in the chat. And we will be communicating that as soon as it's ready and it's ready to communicate.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Garland. So thank you, Dr. Martinez, as well. There were some questions specifically to the amount of days that maybe perhaps our students will be going back. So thank you for addressing that. Another question that came in, will summer school still be virtual?
So right now, the plan is to offer online education throughout the district, but depending on if the schools are ready, I know there is, in speaking with our elementary principals during this week, there is advocacy, if you will, for at least the early learning. Some of our students in particularly kindergarten, TK as well, a little bit of first grade, some of them don't know what it's like to be in school. And so they like to use the summer, if possible, to socialize them, to start introducing them to the rules of a school. Perhaps they've been in online class, but there's so much more beyond the online instruction that they're receiving. It's a lot of the socialization skills, the rules, where things are located at the school. So we are considering, we are hoping that a lot of the supplies and the materials that are being ordered will arrive in June, so that if possible, then that is something that we are considering to offer our students. And I should say, not just the elementary schools, we will have, for example, 6th graders who are at intermediate schools who have never been at that intermediate school. We have 9th graders in high school who have never been at their high school. So as we get these things in place, there is a sense of urgency on our part to post the recruitments and hire as quickly as possible. We've been working very closely with our coworkers in classified HR and reviewing job descriptions. And I know they've been presenting the information to the Personnel Commission. So, we are approaching this from a very collaborative approach and hoping that, we can have as many positions as possible and really be ready for August, but if possible, then in July. We do plan on having a community forum on the reopening of schools. We are waiting for the surveys, if you will, to be concluded, so that the surveys, the intent is to have the input from what the parents are seeking, as well as our employees. So some of our employees would like to return to teach on site, and others would like to continue online. So we will be mindful of that as well and try to accommodate everyone's needs. Back to you, Mr. Barnuevo.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez. That was one of the questions that came in, working collaboratively as a community. And I know, as Dr. Garland mentioned and yourself, that several folks do go on these safety walks, and that information will be forthcoming very soon. And we're eager to get that information out. Question that came in about vaccinations. Will students need or must be vaccinated before returning to school?
Okay, so thank you for that question. And then Dr. Garland can articulate. Right now, we are starting with vaccinations. The vaccination, so I think there's two things. The vaccination is optional. And so one is for employees, it is optional. And for students, we know there's no vaccine for those younger than 16. When it comes to COVID testing, we are starting with COVID testing with our student athletes, our coaches, and we are scheduled to have those conversations with our associations on how we would carry out, whether it be weekly or bi-weekly testing, COVID testing. And so Dr. Garland, could you please share about what does that mean, this COVID testing? How does that look like? How does that work, please?
Thank you. Part of the reopening plan from the Department of Public Health does include surveillance testing or random testing of staff and students. So we are going to work with our associations to decide what that random sample will be. It will be self-administered, and it's a swab in the nose. It doesn't go all the way up here like you've probably seen or maybe experienced, just a swab in the nose that is put inside a little vial, a little tube, and then it's picked up and it's dropped off and it goes to a lab for testing. And then we find out within usually 48 hours if the student or staff member did test positive. And then from there, like I stated before, it doesn't mean everybody goes home. We have to, again, ask those questions. Have you been exposed to someone with COVID-19? Do you have symptoms? Have you had a positive test result from COVID-19 in the past? So there's all these steps. So when we talk about reopening, I think the plan, what Dr. Martinez says, 50 pages, I think at this point, it's a very detailed plan that we're working on. All of these pieces are also in that plan, but there will be surveillance testing in the fall. And
one of the things I wanted to add, as we're discussing our fiscal stability planning, we did start with our athletic conditioning, and we took the precautionary measures, and that involved additional expenditures, but we did it to keep our students safe as well as our coaches. And I think we've been on the right track where we haven't had the positive cases, and we haven't had what we would consider the more drastic results of losing someone as a result of COVID due to participating in our athletic conditioning. We have since then expanded to competitions. We've had cross-country meets, we've had water polo meets, and now we're getting ready for what is considered our high contact sports. So football, volleyball, etc. So we are preparing for that. And we're doing that because we know these experiences are very important for our students. At the same time, acknowledging that we have to hire additional personnel. So we have to hire custodial, campus supervisors. We have to pay additional people to make sure that the spaces are disinfected. So again, we're taking what may appear as a slow approach, but I just want to reiterate it's a safe approach. And we are working on affording our students more opportunities of whether they be on-site activities from what remains during the school year. Again, right now a popular question is what's happening with graduations, what's happening with promotions. We don't have any guidance yet. We are assuming that because they are allowing spectators to go and watch football games and watch water polo and swimming, that we're assuming that there will be some flexibility in allowing school districts for us to have in-person graduations or in-person promotions. We do not have a definite answer. I have reached out to LACO and I'm waiting for a response to see if the Department of Public Health has informed them of anything. But back to you, Mr. Barnuevo.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez. I know we're running up on our 7 o'clock hour. We did have a few more questions, the last questions that have come in, and then we will be all caught up. Again, one of them was in regards to vaccinations for our employees, and have those happened? And then also another question about letting our seniors return to experience some activities, as you just talked about, Dr. Martinez, experiencing the sports or just some other level of activities.
So thank you. Yes, we did make the extra effort and we hosted our own clinics in Montebello Unified so that our employees can get the vaccine if they so desired. The first dose, we did have 2 clinics. We also were allocated codes and we sent some of our coworkers to Cal State LA, as well as referring them to Beverly Hospital, who also extended their services. So this coming Monday, many of us will be returning for our second dose. And so, we're very pleased. I believe that the employees who wanted the vaccine have since been vaccinated. So, I think that has gone rather well. And then the second part, all school principals have received, I would say, an email prompting them to start considering the end of year activities and to start thinking what that would look like. So particularly for the 5th graders, 8th graders, 12th graders, what are they going to do for them? I know Bell Gardens High School, I'm not sure if it's this week or next week, they're having something on campus for their honor roll. And so different schools, I know Sure High School is also planning something for their seniors. And one, it was for them to think about what are they doing, let's say in the month of April, May, June, because we have come down to, almost the end of the school year. And we do want our students to have some sort of interaction with their home school before the school year concludes. Back to you, Mr. Barnuevo.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez. And at this point, we'll go ahead and conclude this evening's meeting. I'd like to thank our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Anthony Martinez, Dr. Garland, Dr. Kevin Yuen, Mr. Don Ellingson, and some of our board members joining us tonight. Thank you to our communities for taking time out of your evening to be with us. I know it is a lot of information to cover over a short period of time. And as a reminder, we will continue to host these community forums on different topics so that we can keep you updated on the latest or any topics that might come up. Dr. Martinez?
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention, we do plan on hopefully presenting our Board of Education with an update in terms of all the steps that are taking place in the district. For example, replacing worn carpets, ceiling tiles, leasing vehicles, hiring personnel. And then also, if possible, I believe the surveys in terms of what is the community seeking for instructional model for the next school year. So we're hoping that all that data will be accumulated and analyzed, and we would be presenting it to the Board of Education. So I'm thinking that the reopening schools plan, that conversation of where are we at, would probably be taking place on that following Wednesday, April the 28th. So that is going to be our intent, so that as soon as we gather the data, analyze the data, and then present to our Board of Education, that we would immediately reach out to the community and inform them of what the data are indicating, and then also share with them if we received any direction or any input from our Board of Education as we continue having conversations during the month of, well, April would be our board meeting in April, but May and June.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez.
And so once again, thank you to all the attendees who joined us this evening. Muchas gracias a los participantes que nos acompañaron esta noche. Les agradecemos que hayan tomado tiempo. Thank you, Mr. Board Member.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.